Welcome to using the accessibility resources in daily instruction video. This training will delve into the accessibility resources provided on the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, or CAASPP, and the English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, or ELPAC. We'll review the learning goals and success criteria of the training and where to find training resources. My name is Lily Rosenberger, and I am currently a management analyst at the Kern County Superintendent of Schools office. So happy to have you watching today's video. So let's take a moment to review the learning goals for this session. This session is focused on providing you with an understanding of why students need to be provided with accessibility resources. You will also explore ways to provide accessibility resources during daily instruction and explore ways to formatively assess students' use of accessibility resources. Now let's consider our success criteria. At the end of the session, participants will be able to recognize the importance of providing accessibility resources, locate or know where to find the appropriate accessibility resources for removing barriers to student learning, and to begin planning for the implementation of and for monitoring the use of accessibility resources. We recognize that we'll be going through a lot of information in a short amount of time during this video. We'll be sharing many resources and documents with you. And so for your convenience, we've organized them all on a web page so that you may have access to them today and beyond. We'll take just a moment now to access the web page and show you how it's organized. Much of the information we'll be going over today assumes a basic understanding of the accessibility resources that are available through CAASPP and ELPAC assessment systems. If you need to review this foundational information, please refer to the links we have made available on the web page. The link bit.ly/AR training series will lead you to the accessibility resources virtual training series webpage. There are 2 modules, and you'll want to select the resources and videos with module B, using accessibility resources in daily instruction. Let's begin by discussing the importance of removing barriers to student learning. Before we begin this discussion on how we might identify and implement the accessibility resources that may benefit our students during daily instruction and on various assessments, we'd like for you to think about some of the factors that contribute to your ability to be successful on a daily basis. On the next few slides, we'll ask you to consider under which types of conditions you work best. For context, you can consider how you like to work at your professional job, or even how you like to work on a project at home. Regardless, just answer each question honestly and know that we aren't looking for a right answer, as these will be based on your personal preferences. So the first thing I'd like for you to consider is whether you prefer to work by yourself or by discussing ideas with others. How about, do you work best virtually or in person? And the last question, what about your preferences for noise? Do you work best when it's very quiet or when there's background noise? As professional adults, we tend to have quite a bit of say in how we structure our environments for our success. But consider for a moment that you were forced to work under conditions that were not optimal for success. For example, if you like to work in quiet, how would it feel like to have your least favorite genre of music constantly on? Or what if the lighting were not to your preference, or your chair was uncomfortable? Again, as adults, we tend to have resources available to help us mitigate such issues. However, we don't always provide our students, who display just as much variability in their preferences, and antecedents for success, with choices and options to help them be successful. This, in part, is what our session is all about: how we can remove unnecessary barriers to help our students do their very best. I would like you now to think about some times when you attempted something very difficult and what helped you to be successful. What barriers made success more difficult? Go ahead and pause the video and take a moment to jot down some ideas. When you are ready to continue, go ahead and resume the video. As adults, when presented with a complex task, we can take all the time we need to process the requirements of the task. We can scaffold complex projects by creating a list to help us remember all of the necessary details to complete the task successfully. We can even call on the expertise of others when we lack knowledge on a topic. There are a variety of strategies that as adults we use on a regular basis to overcome difficult situations. This type of metacognition, or process used to plan, monitor, and assess one's performance, happens almost intuitively for adults. Now imagine if you didn't have those strategies available, or if they didn't work to mitigate your difficulties. Our students need to be engaged in this type of metacognition too, so that we can help them to realize that there is a wide array of strategies and resources that expert learners use to overcome barriers to their success. Given the preferences reflected based on the questions we asked earlier, as well as the aspects that might make a difficult task successful for you or not, now I'd like for you to take a moment of quiet reflection to think about how such things might affect the students that you serve. Consider how they might have answered the questions that I posed to you, and whether your current environment and systems would provide them with the flexibility to be successful. I would like to suggest that the accessibility resources are powerful tools that educators and students can use to provide some of the flexibility our students need to be successful on the wide array of daily tasks we ask them to engage in. As with most aspects of teaching and learning, we're witnessing a shift in thinking when it comes to providing support for all students on a regular basis. Specifically, we're shifting from providing intervention for a few to providing support for all. Thinking intervention happens somewhere else when a student struggles, to emphasizing best first instruction, where all students receive high quality, scientifically based instruction that fits their skill levels and how they learn best. From asking which student needs help to asking what help each student needs. From having programs and people available at some sites to using an intentional design of supports that match the needs of all students. And finally, moving away from not always knowing if and how our efforts are improving student learning to using data to identify and refine efforts that improve student learning. One of the frameworks that closely aligns to these shifts is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. We're going to spend a little bit of time discussing the basics of UDL and how it serves as a theoretical framework for the accessibility resources. If you're unfamiliar with UDL or simply want to explore it further, we've provided several resources on the webpage for you to explore at a later time. One way of thinking about UDL principles is that they represent the why, the what, and the how of learning. The principle of engagement can be viewed as the why of learning. It suggests that we provide multiple means for students to enter into learning and manage the various emotions and executive functions required to complete any given task. There are numerous barriers that could affect a student's ability to initiate and persevere through a task, such as attention level, degree to which the student finds the learning relevant to his or her own life, or feelings of frustration when things get hard. The principle of representation describes the what of learning, meaning how information is conveyed to the learner. Again, there are many potential barriers around how information is presented to students, such as text type, text size, unfamiliar vocabulary, or even complex text structure. Finally, the principle of action and expression can be considered the how of learning, in that it describes options for how students demonstrate the skills and knowledge they've acquired. Barriers related to this principle might include physical limitations, dysgraphia, or lack of goal-setting strategies. Regardless of the barrier, UDL provides a framework by which we can systematically address and remove them when appropriate. Notice that the goal of UDL is to create expert learners who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, and strategic and goal-oriented. Providing students with the various tools and resources to meet their goals, while also providing them opportunities for trial and error with those tools, is essential in creating the next generation of expert learners. We'll now spend a little time exploring the role that providing supports such as highlighting, text-to-speech, or masking plays in our classrooms every day. We will consider a few mantras related to UDL to help us focus our time together. Our first mantra is that variability is the norm, and therefore it can be planned for. This means that we recognize that there is no such thing as an average student, and that every single one of our students has individual strengths and areas for growth. For example, just because a student may currently have below average skills in reading, they could have higher than average language skills. UDL is a useful tool because it helps us to categorize and plan for the wide variability that exists in all of our classrooms. Our second UDL mantra, firm goals, flexible means, requires that we always keep in mind our end goal when deciding which barriers should or should not be removed for students. Educators must know which discrete skills and standards are to be mastered so that students can then make choices in how they attain those goals. Anything that detracts from the goal should not be allowed. For example, to assess students' skills related to formulating an argument, students can be given the choice to either write an essay, participate in a live debate, or even record themselves giving a speech. Our third and final UDL mantra, remove unnecessary barriers with an emphasis on unnecessary. Keeping our goal always in mind, we would not want to remove barriers that would dilute the end goal. For example, if reading at grade level is a barrier for some students, then they can be provided an audio version of their text. Otherwise, every content area such as math, social studies, and science may become inaccessible to these students. On the other hand, if we are assessing a student's reading skills, then we would not want to provide an audio version of a text. So using our second mantra, firm goals, flexible means, We would now like you to engage in some independent learning and reflection around the concepts that we've touched on so far. Our firm goals are, first, that you consider the role of supports in teaching, learning, and assessment via accessibility resources. And two, that you reflect on what is resonating with you and make connections to others' thinking. As long as we attack these goals, we're comfortable giving you some options and choices to get there. We would like for you to consider the role of supports in teaching, learning, and assessment through the following flexible means. For the principle of representation, we have given you options to access the information as a video or as a blog post, or maybe even both. You may watch the video or read the blog post on Decriminalizing Supports by Shelley Moore. Shelley Moore is a teacher, researcher, and consultant based in Vancouver, Canada. Her research and work focuses on theory and effective practices of inclusion, special education, curriculum, and teacher professional development. The information is exactly the same, but you may access either or both, as is your preference. When you have finished either watching the video or reading the blog post, we will ask you to respond on the Padlet. Remember our goal: consider the role of supports in teaching, learning, and assessment via accessibility resources, and reflect on what is resonating with you. Aligned with the principle of action and expression, we're giving you the option to post your reflections about your learning and connect with others. You may type, record using a video, post an image, or record using audio, whatever is resonating with you. You may also respond to others' posts using the same options. For example, one participant responded by quoting from the blog post: "Let's teach kids the skills and decriminalize supports they need to prevail. They will self-regulate their learning and get what they need before they fail." When you are ready, pause the video and access either the Decriminalizing Supports video or blog post by navigating to bit.ly/flexible Padlet. This is also where you will post your response. You may resume the video once you've completed this activity. The goal of UDL is removing the barriers to make learning accessible, not easier. That's another myth we need to dispel. Sometimes we hear educators decry the use of supports as they make the learning easier. We think Shelley Moore adequately debunked this idea. But let's share one more analogy to differentiate between making something accessible versus making it easier. Another way to think of these supports is as a temporary scaffold. Just as this coach is temporarily supporting the athlete, with the goal of the athlete carrying all of the weight eventually. According to the California English Language Arts English Language Development Framework, scaffolding does not change the intellectual challenge of the task, but instead allows learners to successfully participate in or complete the task to build the knowledge and skills to be able to perform similar tasks independently in the future. It's also important to remember that while teachers might have the flexibility to provide temporary scaffolds during classroom instruction, this flexibility isn't always available on statewide assessments. The construct of what is being assessed would determine the availability of accessibility resources on assessments. For example, if the student's mathematical calculation skills are being assessed, it would not be appropriate to provide a calculator as support.